Hey, this is Phil, co-founder of the Cubicle, and you are listening to the CornerCutter podcast.
Hey, welcome to the CornerCutter podcast. Podcasting since 2014, I'm your host Josh, and this is the most consistent cubing podcast dedicated to entertain and educate you with in-depth conversations with cubers from all across the sport. My website is thecornercutterpodcast.com, and thank you for joining me today. I have an awesome show lined up. Today's interview is with Phil Yu from the Cubicle.us. We dive into the history of the Cubicle, some about the lawsuit, the RedBull Championships, and some other interesting topics as well. We'll go right on ahead with that in a minute, but I would just like to remind you that you can listen to this podcast on YouTube. My YouTube channel name is CornerCutter. You can go subscribe on there, and I also post some videos as well, so it's not just all audio podcasts. So if you're on YouTube all the time, it might be easier for you. So I want you to consume this podcast whatever the easiest way is for you. Maybe you don't listen to podcasts much, but you decide to tune into this episode. Just make sure to hit subscribe on either YouTube or your other podcast platform, and you'll get every episode. Also, if you have any feedback for anything we talk about in this show or any of the other episodes, please email in. My email address is feedback@thecornercutterpodcast.com. And now let's jump right into the interview. Phil Yu, thanks for joining me today on the CornerCutter podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't you start off by telling us something interesting about yourself that most people wouldn't know?
Okay, so I guess I thought about this because I've been asked before, and my answer is usually that I have a life outside of my work. Over the years, I think a lot of people have come to associate me personally with my business, and that in conjunction with me feeling very old compared to others sometimes makes me feel that people forget, but, realistically, I'm still a 20-something. I like sports, gaming, music, both from, an appreciation standpoint and actually doing and playing. And so I'm just very similar to what you'd expect a 20-something to be, except I have a role in a business that's really important to me. So I guess that's my secret, which is not really a secret.
Okay. Well, let's dive right into your business. Why don't you tell us about the Cubicle.us, some of the services it offers, and how it is different than other puzzle shops?
Sure. So the Cubicle at its core is an e-commerce business, but we like to think about it as an e-commerce business with some extras. So to start off, the e-commerce business is really straightforward. We have products. We market it, we sell it, we get more product, and we repeat, and we serve thousands and thousands of customers with as many products as we can. In addition to just cube products, we have other puzzles, accessories, some games, and we stock puzzle accessories like lube, stickers, and we have a few services like our Pro Shop, which builds all the custom-made cubes for customers interested in something custom and nice. On the side bit, we have some software development. That's been kind of at a standstill recently because of our other activities. But we do make software, and we have very strong interest in making more software in the future. And now to the extras, we really pride ourselves on being the most creative and the most inventive. Usually, retail stores really don't do R&D. Instead, they buy and sell things from manufacturers, and it's a very predictable sort of very rhythm-based business. We actually flip this dynamic a little bit and have contributed to hardware and accessory development in very meaningful ways, and that's something that we're very proud of. and we're very happy about. And so that's one area where I think we very clearly stand out is we innovate and we make new things. We don't wait for other people to do it. The other thing is we spend our profits on the community and its people. And so in this context, we put a lot of effort into sponsoring people and competitions all year round. We're always interested in getting involved with competitions big and small. We've done U.S. Nationals for several years in a row, and we're always very excited to contribute to that. And I think in this light, I feel we're extremely different from other shops in the industry because instead of sticking to the norm, we try to make things better. And when we discover something better, we try to share the benefit with others.
Yes, I love that. Now, how did you start the Cubicle Labs? Could you tell the story behind that?
Yes, I can most definitely do that. So Chris Tran, basically he was in a situation where he needed to find some work. I believe this was the fall of 2016, or the border between summer and fall. And I had already known him very well before working with him at the Cubicle, and so I was like, okay, I have some work to do. You want to do it? And he takes me up on the offer, and he's doing everyday office work. And then he discovers, I can make stuff, and I want to use my science background for cubing. And so I said, okay, let's do it. Let's go make stuff. And so we made the first magnetic 3x3 that was commercially available. And ever since then, we've trusted each other and helped each other make more stuff. The more we make, the better everyone feels because they get the benefit of inventive things, and the more confidence we get to explore more and more. And so that's where it came from. It was just a wild idea to make something different.
When did he first talk to you about magnets in cubes?
It was like a month in after the job.
Wow.
So probably September. We started making prototypes, and it was really funny. We came out with the prototype, and he came out publicly with the idea, and then all of a sudden, everybody starts going, oh, yeah, I thought about this first. I did this first. And it was funny because even if it was true, nobody really took the risk to put it out there commercially. Because when you put out something commercially, you're undertaking a far bigger risk than if you're not, because then you have the responsibility of making the product good. It has to be polished. The QC has to be good. It's a higher standard when you do that. And, we took that risk, and he came out with a GTS-1 that's magnetic, and we still have that today.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's the process of bringing a new Cubicle Labs product to the market? Is Chris Tran still the main guy behind coming up with new ideas and stuff like that?
I would say so. So usually how it works is if anybody has an idea, we talk to the people who are able to make it happen. And Chris just happens to be the person that's most likely to be able to make something happen given his science background. And so, if I have a problem and I want to solve it, I think of a clever way to solve it, and then I say, hey, Chris, how possible is this? Can you make this exist? And then he tells me yes or no based on what he knows, and we go from there. But, so far, actually, quite a few people have approached him with problems. How do I do X? How do I do Y? And then, he gets to work, and a solution is formed between everyone.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now, the big news with the Cubicle during the past several months has been about the lawsuit. What were you doing when you first heard about it?
Oh, I was minding my own business. It was about 6 o'clock at night, and I was actually on a tennis court. I was practicing, and it was during a changeover. I sat down and I checked my phone, and I saw an email that we were served with a lawsuit, and then I just forgot about tennis. I had to make phone calls. I went back to work. So that was where I physically was. My mindset was, I was not expecting it, and then it happened.
Mm-hmm. Was there any hints leading up to it that this might happen, or anything?
I guess. I mean, there were Rubik's had litigated with other parties in America before that, but I mean that usually in itself doesn't hint that anybody else might get sued. I don't really know. It's kind of hard to tell what companies will do with their rights and with their activities. But I don't think anything strongly indicated that it was going to be an issue.
Now, could you explain the most recent news on the settlement?
Yes, so we reached a mutually agreeable settlement. The settlement is confidential, so unfortunately can't discuss the details. But mutually agreeable means both parties agree that the terms are cool and they're fine. And I think we're going to just move forward and try our best to help the community grow and to do what our business does best and to really focus our efforts on doing good rather than fighting each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really happy that you guys were able to work everything out without any major issues.
Me too. It was very, very stressful, and it's funny because I've studied lawsuits for the for years from a very theoretical perspective, and it's weird to actually be in one.
Mm-hmm. Did that really help you?
Yeah, it did. A lot of people ask if I represented myself. I didn't. That would most people would say it's a very bad idea. Our legal team is really great. I have working experience with them, so we kind of understand each other really well. And yeah, I mean, it helps. It helps you understand, the risks, the benefits, and also what people are talking about. Which is good, but also it can be bad because it can scare you if you think too much about it.
Okay, I can see that.
Yeah. It's like being a doctor and knowing what a disease does, right? And then it just gets you.
Yeah. Okay. So in the announcement that you guys put out, you also talked a little bit about the RedBull Championships.
I did.
Could you explain what has happened with them?
Yes, I can. So Red Bull is essentially an energy drink brand, but they like to get involved with extreme sports or just not so extreme sports or any sort of sport really that has energy and excitement. It's both to grow the sport and to obviously promote their brand because that's what they do. And they picked up speed cubing, and speed cubing got their attention because they thought it was extremely exciting. It's a mix between using your mind and your body. And it's just a really cool and impressive thing in general. And I could see if they had a cubing-based Red Bull ad, it would look really cool. And from the community standpoint, if Red Bull had a friendly relationship with the community and helped grow, the competition scene or diversify opportunities for people, it would be kind of a win-win. And so that's what they were after. And at first, I completely understand it wasn't really well received because of the whole legal debacle between my company and Rubik and just really awkward timing. But everything sort of fell into place, and they've actually made a lot of assurances that they're working with the WCA and they're very receptive to what the community wants. Those really good faith assurances gave us enough sort of guarantee to begin a collaboration to see what is possible.
So what are future plans for Red Bull?
So they want to do something exciting for cubing, and so for this year they had 3 events. They have speed cubing, one-handed, I think it's without inspection, and then they have match the scramble. I think they might shuffle the events and do different things. They want to also collaborate with the WCA and have some sort of hybrid event, which is pretty interesting. Not sure how that will work out exactly, but it's very possible. And I think most importantly, they want to expose speed cubing to other people that are interested but haven't gotten the chance to see speed cubing. So, I mean, they have a very big audience because they're Red Bulls, so hopefully new people will appreciate our sport.
I can see how that could happen easily.
Yes.
Now, is the WCA still going to be the people for world records and stuff like that. What would happen if someone got a world record in the RedBull Championship?
Right. So how it works now is the WCA still runs WCA competitions, and for the hardcore speed cuber, I think they would consider it still, the WCA performance as a measure of their cubing ability, because Red Bull introduces a bunch of other new factors, like how well do you compete under pressure, and then how well do you compete under pressure if Felix is on the other side and he makes eye contact with you, right? I'm guessing it'll scare plenty of people, and so, I think speed cubers will still regard the WCA as the best measure for their performance as a speed cuber. But it's pretty clear that, Red Bull is not in it to just take over or do anything. It's really just to have a presence, to grow the brand and the sport simultaneously. And as far as records go, I'm not sure that organizations will share records because the WCA has a policy where anybody can compete. You can have a 4-year-old, you can have an 80-year-old. They're fair game to compete, but Red Bull has certain age restrictions. And given the different ways people can enter competitions, I don't think their results would be cross-compatible that way, unless something really different changes.
How are you involved with Red Bull or the championships in any way?
Right. So I have a team of people working with me who I will take to Red Bull to support their event. And in the long term, I'm going to help them with planning, and I'm going to really represent the interests of the cubing community. I've been in this community for so long. I like to think I have a very good understanding of what cubers want as cubers, what cubers want as people, what they want as customers. I've been to, so many different events and been a part of so many different segments of being a speed cuber that, I think I'm confident in my background, and I'm going to use that background to really make sure that speed cubing interests are being respected and followed. It's really important to me.
Okay. Now, could you go through the history of the Cubicle?
Sure.
Was this your first business, and could you just name through the major events leading up to now from when you started?
Okay, so it was not my first business. I actually had 2 businesses before the Cubicle. Most people wouldn't know about them. The first one was I was a private music teacher. I taught violin performance and music theory and also audition prep. And I was just basically a sole proprietor doing my own business. I considered it a business because I had no one to help me and I had to just make decisions on my own, that type of thing. And I also have a violin shop. I repair instruments, I restore instruments, I sell accessories, and I trade violins. It's pretty cool. It's very different from cubing because each and every violin is different. They're not mass produced. And some of them are really old, and it's actually a good thing that a violin is old. So that's where, my business background comes from. Cubicle was started in 2011 with my partner, James. We were students in college, and we were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool to start a cube shop? Because at the time, the industry was still very young. There was a lot of room to grow as a professional business. And as students in business schools, we thought it would be, pretty cool to do it. I was a very competitive cuber back then, and James cubed a lot as well. So, that was business was built on our mutual interest in cubing and just the simple running of a business. It started in our dorm room, and we just had a lot of boxes in our living room. And I think it kind of annoyed the rest of our roommates, but, we just kind of did it, and it grew from there.
How old were you at that time?
This was 2011, so I was 21 years old.
Okay. What was the hardest part about starting a, online business when you're only 21?
Well, not so much about the age, but it has a lot to do with what else 21-year-olds are doing. Most 21-year-olds are in college. They're trying to impress employers to get jobs. And so when you're starting a company that hasn't proven itself to be a profitable company, it is a very big risk because then you have to, fulfill your responsibilities as a worker in a company, but also study. And then the whole job application thing becomes really strange because it makes you wonder, should I apply for other jobs or should I just all in on my business and just do that? Because who doesn't want to have confidence in their business, right?
Now, you said your roommates got a little irritated about the boxes and stuff. Other than that, how was the feedback?
Oh, it was cool. I mean, anytime a business enters the industry, especially when the business is launched by a pretty well-known person, it's welcome because it increases competition. It's good for the consumers, and it's overall just it's overall good. And I think the annoyance was mostly for fun. I don't think they cared all that much, but sometimes, they want to invite guests over and then the guests come in and they're like, what the hell are these boxes doing here? It's kind of a laughing matter, but I think everyone was cool. Actually, another one of those people was a Cuber also. He just lived in our house, and we did that.
What were some other major events leading up until now?
Right, so I think in terms of hardware development, I think one very big major event was the fitted stickers. We were one of the first companies to have fitted stickers in at least the American market. I know in Europe they had a bunch of fitted stickers, and that just blew up, and now every cube needs a set of stickers. Before, they were all square, and for some reason we felt that was okay, even though now it just looks horrible. So that was pretty cool. And another big thing was the weighted loop system. So before that, it was kind of just everywhere. But then, we came out with weights 1 through 5, and people can have a lot of choice to calibrate their puzzle to whatever they wish. And so then I think that concept of like the weighted viscosity really stuck. And so other businesses started introducing their own weighted systems and spectrums. And now we have a bunch of companies with a bunch of options, and that's really good for people. And, apart from just simple weighted silicone, lubes in general have just, exploded in popularity. And so we're trying our very best to make new stuff, to get new feels. And then, of course, Pro Shop was a really big thing. In 2015, we picked up Ro. So actually, it was his 3rd birthday at our company for, I guess a few days ago. It was his 3rd anniversary. We've had a working relationship with him for a pretty long time, and the department has grown immensely over the years. And so that was a really big thing to have a full service sort of cube setup system. And then, of course, Cubicle Labs was a really big thing. The lawsuit was really big. And, of course, the new collaboration with RedBull is on the horizon, and we consider that very big as well.
Okay, very interesting. Now, I understand people can come by and visit your warehouse, I guess, or office?
Yes, they can.
What does visiting that entail?
So, usually they express interest, usually through email or private message through one of our social media platforms. We set up an appointment, and they show up, and we have a good time. So basically, we walk them through parts of the office. We introduce them to the people, and it's funny because sometimes it's like a very young child, and they're like, "Oh, it's Damien. I've heard so much about you," and it's really cool to see people connect like that. And so we take them through. We show them the warehouse. If they want to pick up any puzzles, they're always welcome to do that. We have pretty nice discounts if you come visit us and buy something. And we also show you some experimental products and off-market products that haven't been released. And so there's a pretty good reason to visit if you're interested in stuff that is about to be on the market, but not yet for sale.
Okay, yeah, that sounds really fun coming by. What's the hardest part about having a product-based business?
I guess there isn't really one hardest part in the sense of like the daily functioning of the business. I mean, there are a lot of challenges. You have to make sure things are in stock. You have to make sure things are listed properly, that the products are accurately described so that people don't get surprised when they purchase something and it's different. Usually, product-based businesses are pretty predictable, and if you're good at running them, it's usually not a problem. If anything, one hard part is the winter. When the holidays hit, it's always very hectic, but that's all part of the job, and making sure that we're operating very clean and fast and efficient with full stock is a very big priority. That can be difficult. I guess if I had everything to choose from, the hardest part would be when something unpredictable happens, like a lawsuit. That unpredictability and surprise is, I think, the hard part. Just stuff that happens from out of nowhere that you don't consider, part of your cost or, spending projection, and then it just suddenly appears.
Speaking of physical products like cubes, do you go into statistics at all? Do you look at what most popular cubes are, or have you ever noticed, do sales increase of a certain cube after, let's say, a world record happens or anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are some correlations. Sometimes it depends on the season and what the accomplishment is. Some correlations are stronger than others. But it does happen. It happens with social media announcements of cubes. It happens with reviews for cubes. A lot of things affect sales of cubes. And so, we are really interested in what affects sales of cubes. That way we know what to focus on when we're trying to promote a puzzle.
Mm-hmm. When a new cube releases that is significantly better than another, let's say the Haze 7,
mm-hmm.
Do people still buy the Wuji 7x7?
You'd be surprised. People still do. If you visit my shop and you tell me you want to buy a Wuji, I'll say no, buy a Haze. Because it's just so good. But when people buy online, sometimes, they watch a review of the Wuji and they don't pay attention to when the review was shot or released. And then they're like, oh yeah, this guy has a very high, opinion of the Wuji, so let me pick up a Wuji. That, or they want to support Chi Mofangi, which is a wonderful company. And so if they want to support that company, they buy the Wuji, or maybe they're sponsored and they have to get a Wuji, then, they don't have much choice. So, I mean, it does happen, but then most of the market, you can assume, will gravitate towards the better product, because I think speedcubers, as a type of person, they're very interested in knowing as much as they can, and they're very smart people. They're very detail oriented, and usually they'll find what's best for them pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I really like about the Cubicle is the reviews on the website. You can just sort by the average review, and usually the top 2 or 3 cubes, one of those is the absolute best on the market.
Yes. The reviews are generally very reliable, and the top views that are voted good reviews are actually, some of them are very in depth. I remember there was one on the Volk Power M, which was so in depth that I was a little scared. But it was people write some really good things, and you can really get a good idea of what the puzzle is like. And if you pair that with some video reviews, then you'll get a very good understanding of the product.
Mm-hmm. So before, or now that the lawsuit's over, what does a typical day look like for you?
So for me, right now it's September, so we're planning a lot of cool things. So we have another round of R&D stuff that we have to churn out so that if it results in a product, people will see it in the winter. We have to make sure the store is stocked and ready to produce as quickly and efficiently as possible during the winter. Our 7-year anniversary is actually this month, and so we need to plan a very special activity for that. A lot of my day is planning. So we plan activities, and then we find the right people to do the activities, and we do them. Also, we're really close to 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. I think we're currently at 93K, which is just mind-boggling for me, because when I was starting, I never thought I would have a YouTube channel that big, and I never thought I would make a video with 1 million views, but our tutorial passed that, and that's something I never expected. But all distractions aside, we plan a lot of stuff. And of course, there's Halloween and there's Black Friday, Christmas, New Year, along with new products that we have to fit into the schedule. So, there's a lot of stuff that we have to plan. And my job as a manager is to fit everything on the schedule so that everything works out. We don't forget anything. We don't sacrifice an opportunity for another one. All the pieces have to fit really tightly in order for the business to run well.
Now, what do you see for the future of the Cubicle? What are some of your goals?
So now that we are focusing on a lot of, other things besides legal, I would love to see where this RedBull opportunity goes. I want to see them do good for the community, and I want to see our sport grow. I do believe it does have sport-like elements to, enough to make it a sport. And so I would like to just see where that goes. Of course, I'm interested in seeing what kind of R&D will churn out and what types of products will be available to speedcubers. And a lot of people ask me, what improvements do you think you can do on hardware? Aren't we at the end? And every day I say, no way. We're nowhere close to being near the end of good hardware development. So I'm going to focus on that. But also, at the same time, definitely devoting resources to more sponsorships and more community-oriented things. And one thing that is really important to remember about the community-related things is I think the overall goal is to make something for everyone. And sometimes people get the idea that when we do things like sponsorships, people get too fixated on the fast cubers and like the 1%. So that's something that I need to really remind myself not to intensely fixate on, because it's really important to make something for everyone. And it's important to remember that the cubing world has a ton of diversity. People like puzzle collectors, people who casually solve, people who are really fast, people who are getting there. We want to make things that everyone can enjoy. And I think that's where the software and the competition sponsorships come from, and some educational opportunities also in the future. So those are generally, I would say, my goals.
Okay, sounds awesome. Do you have any insights on upcoming puzzles? Is Chi or Moyu actually working on a clock? Do you see anything with clock in the future?
Okay, so I know magnetic clocks are pretty good. I haven't spoken to them for a while about the clocks, actually, so I don't have firsthand knowledge, but I think both those companies know it's painfully obvious that there's a gap in the clock market. And as clock continues to be an event and, people continue to compete, I think eventually one of these companies will release a clock. But, as we talk, even all these companies are trying to produce new puzzles and new products. The Valk could be getting something new. If you look at the timeline, the Valk was 2 years ago, and then the Valk Power was a year after. And so usually companies develop patterns like how much time it takes before the next puzzle is released.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of extrapolate when these puzzles will come out. And the Valk Power is kind of close to that next iteration. And of course, GAN is on the verge of releasing something new.
Okay, cool. Going back to clock, what is the reason, what's your view if, let's say, Chi released a clock? Do you think it would become a much more popular event, and then that would lead to much better hardware?
It's hard to tell whether it works one way or the other. People get good at the event, and then it becomes popular, and then more demand of hardware is needed, or the opposite. Like the hardware comes, and then the people come. I think definitely there's room to make a better clock. It's just a matter of priority, because these companies have to juggle a bunch of other projects on top of clock, and it also really depends on demand for clock in China. So these companies, sometimes people forget, are based in China, and some of their view on what products will succeed and will not succeed are based on what they observe in their home country. And as Westerners, in the United States or Canada or Europe, we see things that they sometimes don't see because we're in a different part of the world. And so sometimes we realize, oh man, there's a demand for X, Y, and Z. And in China, they're like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I see this instead. I see a demand for that instead. So sometimes that can explain the reason why there's a discrepancy between demand and supply. It's just they have their own view of what is demanded.
Okay, that's very interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. So there is quite a big demand for speed cubes in China?
Yeah, actually, the tastes are really different. It's really funny. So I think two things or I guess three things are really different. Hopefully I remember the three things. So speed cubes, yes. Economy cubes especially. The economy cube market is extremely big in China. But we have different tastes. Like, for example, they love weak magnets in China. We love strong magnets in China, and in the United States, not China. And it was funny because I was talking to the designer, Jim from Mofengi. He makes X-Man design. I showed him some of our Angstrom 4x4s, and those have intentionally really strong magnets. And he got the cube, and he was like, "Oh, what is this? This is like I can't believe that this is a product." I'm like, "Yes, it's a product. Yes, like Max gets world records with it. His magnets are so strong." And he was like, "Yeah, this would never be okay in China." It's really weird. It's like food being saltier in a different country because of like their regional taste. That and I don't think they use that much lube in China, or the lube technology is a lot simpler, and so people like to keep it simple. In the West, we have so much development in lube that we could really customize our stuff, and in China, they keep it simple, and it produces really different cubes. So Worlds is always really interesting. You go there and you feel like a European's cube or an American's cube could be very different from an Asian's cube.
Yeah. Any idea on if any other companies are coming out with a new Pyramix, like a top-end Pyramix like the X-Man Bell?
I have not seen one yet. I know Moyu's coming out with a new Scube, but I have not seen any new Pyramixes. I know Yushin hasn't made a really like fancy high-end Pyramix. Mm-hmm. Gan hasn't really made much of anything besides like cube-shaped puzzles. So any one of those companies could make one, but I think the Pyramixes are still going really strong. People are averaging great on the puzzle, and I don't think it has enough weakness for the companies to make them. But I think they could be due for updates very soon, because I remember that was the first generation of magnetic Pyramixes, right? The Bell and the Moyu magnetic.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And since then, I think people have learned so much about making magnetic puzzles that perhaps they have some new ideas on how to make one better.
Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on a concave Pyramix?
I think concave Pyramixes could be a thing, but I'm not super confident about it because aside from the Wingy Cube, I'm not sure concave puzzles just did very well on the market and in competition. I know people prefer strongly the sculpted Megaminx over the concave version, and concave cubes have never been that important in the context of competition. So, I think it could be a thing, but I think generally a Pyramix with some grip assistance system could be possible if the right one was designed.
Okay. What is your favorite cube to solve?
My favorite cube to solve, so more like the only cube I solve. So basically, I do 3x3. I can do 2x2 and some big cubes, but I'm just not very good at it. So I mostly stick to 3x3. And recently, I've been doing one-handed with a Volk, and I've been, getting back closer to the times I had years ago when I practiced. And I just like studying new 3x3s and finding new ways to make the feel good, and pushing the limits of that one puzzle. That's what I grew up on, 3x3.
Now, you touched on this a little bit in the first question. What do you like doing in your free time? Yes,
so in my free time, I always cut a part of it to do work. So if I come home from work and I have 3 hours of free time, I force myself to spend a third of it or something on work so I get more work done at home. Aside from that, I really like playing tennis. I think tennis is a fantastic sport because it combines physical exertion with like a mental aspect, and it has game elements to it. And it's also 1v1 or 2v2 if you want to play doubles, but I mostly play singles. It has a lot of very cool, dynamics between players that are playing the game. And so that's really fun. I love gaming. I don't game as much as I used to, but I used to play Pokemon competitively. Played a lot of online PvP and was actually rated pretty high in Rambat and Showdown and OU in Generations 3 through 5. I remember I made it to the top of the ladder when I was playing Gen 5 and some Gen 6. But now I just play for fun. But sometimes people, invite me to play and they don't know that I've probably spent thousands of hours playing, and they get really surprised. Aside from that, I play a little league. It's kind of like it focuses your attention on the game, but then it distracts you from the stress of work. But I think esports in general are really cool because its top performers and content producers can make livings, playing or showcasing the game. And that's one interesting direction that I think speedcubing could take that would really benefit I think the sport and its people. The only thing I'm scared of is the negatives of esports. When you hear people get up at 8 in the morning, they play from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and then they have to go to their doctor because they're scared that they have wrist problems. And then when they lose, people flame them online. And it's, if we can avoid some of the pressures of, competitive gaming, I think it's a pretty cool model to consider. So that. I also like cooking. I've been cooking a lot. I make mostly Asian food, Chinese stuff. I want to learn how to make sushi. That's something I'm really interested in. And I also take care of an extremely spoiled hamster. He's kind of overweight, but really cute, and we spoil him with food.
Okay. You mentioned one of your first businesses was a violin business. Do you think music and cubing are related in any way?
Absolutely. So my understanding of it comes from the context of playing the violin. Playing the violin can be an extremely solitary experience. I remember when I was young, I used to practice a ton every day to the point where I had virtually no social life. I'm not saying that's the same thing as cubing, but it's the same style of commitment. You play something and you critique yourself and say, okay, this was good, but I need to work on this. It's very transparent to the player what they need to work on, and I think most high-level cubers are extremely aware of their strengths and weaknesses. It's also mostly a solo sport in the sense that, you're there and you can control your performance. The aspect of performing something and being able to be expressive and have good musicianship while being technically sound is also there when you compete in front of other people in big events. And the equipment itself is I could draw a lot of similarities. So, cubes are in a sense mass produced, but there's a ton of customization that you can do to make the cube yours. And that's the similar thing you can do with an instrument. Once you get used to it and you play it, it becomes yours, and you can express yourself on it very organically. And that's the same thing with the cube. When I use my cube, I feel good. I can turn confidently, no problems. If I use like a random cube, it just feels weird. So I think there are a lot of similarities. And I think the sense of discipline and the appreciation of good practice skills is a really big overlap between my understanding and experience with music and cubing.
Yeah, those are some interesting and great answers. You touched on some points that I really haven't thought about or heard of before.
I think one thing different is, though, like violin sometimes music is subjective. You like the way something is executed. It doesn't have to technically be better or worse. If it's a style you like, then you like it. And cubing performance is a little more quantifiable, so that, needed getting used to.
Okay, final question. What's something you've changed your mind about recently?
Okay, so in the cubing context, it was magnetic cubes for one-handed. And so I have a problem where I am very picky about one-handed hardware. And as I age and I get physically weaker, the type of hardware I can use and still turn relatively quickly gets smaller. And so it's really hard to find a cube that's good for me. But recently I started borrowing one of Rose's cubes, and it's really good for me, but it's magnetic. It's really strong magnetic, and I never thought I would like a puzzle like that, except I do, and I get pretty good times. This morning I got a 12 average doing just one-handed very casually, so that felt really good. My 10 single felt really good, and so I was really surprised because before I just couldn't really handle magnetic cubes because it affects my ability to follow through with my turn. But for some reason, his cube was really good, so I asked to borrow it long term. He was okay with it. And I guess in the end, we just end up borrowing each other's cubes. So that was funny, and I changed my mind about that, and I'm happy I did.
Well, thank you, Phil, so much for taking the time to come on the CornerCutter podcast.
Yep, thanks for having me, and thanks for the very interesting questions.
I'll have links to things we mentioned in this episode on the website in the show notes, thecornercutterpodcast.com/show notes. The website has a new look, so you should go check it out, thecornercutterpodcast.com. Hey, if you've been enjoying this podcast, please go over to Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're listening on and write me a review. I always love to hear what you guys think about the podcast, and it helps other people listen to the podcast. So I would very much appreciate that. And if you do leave a review, I will read it on one of the next episodes. International Podcast Day is coming right up. It is September 30th, and it's a day where you spread the word about podcasting. I have a fun show planned for that, for the show that comes out around that time. So make sure you hit subscribe so you can listen to that. It's going to be a really fun show. And on International Podcast Day or the days leading up, it's a great time to share the word about podcasting. So talk to just regular people you talk to or people you run into. I was in the library recently, and I asked the librarian if he listened to podcasts. He said he didn't really, and he was planning to check them out, though, when he went on vacation. So next time I see him, I'm going to ask him if he checked him out, and I'll tell him about International Podcast Day as well. Anyway, though, I would like to thank Phil Yu again for coming on the podcast. It was an awesome interview, and now it's time to take this episode back to the scrambling table and come back again next week for episode 52 of the CornerCutter podcast.